Okay, so that was just covering the 5 foundational elements of economics, the 5 foundations. So we're going to talk a bit now about some other important principles in economics, particularly in microeconomics, that I think are of relevance to One Health work, being better communicators, better collaborators, and being able to identify and understand how economics can play or influence One Health objectives or One Health working options. Bless you. So we'll start with supply and demand, which if anybody knows anything about economics, it's probably this, right? Supply and demand. So this is quite simple, just to say that as the price increases, supply increases, right? So if you were selling me bottles of water, if I offered you $20 per bottle of water, you'd probably give me a lot. If I offered you $100 per bottle of water, you'd probably give me a lot more, right? So as the price increases, you're willing as a producer to produce more and more and more. So price goes up, supply goes up. And when we look at a supply curve, it's going to be the graph of the quantity supplied at different prices. So we're showing at each price point how many units does the market provide at each price. So law of demand. Anybody want to guess? So what would happen if the price goes up? What happens to demand? Yeah. Archon, you can't participate. You know this too well. Right? I mean, you guys know this, right? You guys are all going to the grocery store. You're going to the mall. You're spending money. If something costs less, you're more willing to buy usually, right? Same thing. If you'll spend, if you can get the same thing for less money, you're of course going to choose the cheaper option, right? So as prices increase, demand decreases. So it's the opposite of supply. So that means the demand curve, the quantity demanded at different prices. So you see the top, you have this curve that's starting in the bottom left and going top right. And in demand, you have the opposite. It starts top left and goes bottom right. So then there's a special point in economics called the equilibrium, which is where it settles, right? This is where the point at which the demand and supply curve intersect. So this is considered a fair market price. So this is the point where the sellers and the buyers agree this is the right price. And you probably have experienced this firsthand if you go to the wet market and you're trying to negotiate the price of vegetables or something. Okay, so what does it look like? Price is on the y-axis, quantity is on the x-axis, and what's this one? With more confidence, please. Supply, yes. So that's our supply curve. Okay, that means this one must be demand. Okay, so that special point there is the equilibrium, where they intersect, and that's the fair market price. I didn't draw it here, but that means that if you follow this down, that's the quantity that the market produces. If you take it to the left, that's the price that the market produces at. So that's the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So there are things that can influence or shift the supply curve. Right? So for a decrease in supply, if the cost of an input good rises, then the supply curve will shift to the left. It will retract. There will be less available on the market. So for example, if I have chickens that lay eggs and the price of their feed goes up, you're going to see a shift in the supply, right? Because it costs more to produce the same amount. A business tax increase or subsidy decrease. So that's to say, it has the same general idea, right? If there's a tax imposed on meat, on the chickens, or on egg production, if there's a tax on eggs, it's the same as an input price. It acts in the same way because it means it costs more. It costs more than for them to produce the eggs because of the tax. The number of sellers decreasing can decrease the supply, so people just exit the market. And the price of the product is expected to rise in the future. So if I'm a seller and I expect that 2 months from now, I can sell the same thing for twice the price, I don't want to sell it now. I want to wait and sell it in the future. So that can also decrease supply. So on the opposite side, you see if the cost of an input falls, that means it's less expensive to produce, so I can produce more. So you'll see a shift to the right of the supply curve. And this is opposite of what we saw before, business tax decrease or a subsidy increase. It's acting in the same way. It's making it more affordable, cheaper for me to produce, so I can produce more. And again, the number of sellers increases. So if it's an attractive market, you have free entry and free exit, you'll have more sellers joining, and that can also shift the supply curve to the right. And opposite of what we said last time, if the price of the product is expected to fall in the future, you can see that I'm willing to sell for a better price now. I'm more willing to sell. So that shifts the curve to the right. So yeah, so we have cost of an input's important. The effect of subsidies and taxes is important. The numbers of sellers in a market with free entry and exit, and future expectations are all important in moving the supply curve left or right. So the final thing is a business deploys a more efficient technology, which can also produce, it's again making it cheaper to provide the same material at a lower price, so you see a shift in the supply curve. We don't have a counterpoint here for decreasing, because I think businesses are generally in the market of not using technology that makes them less efficient. So that's skipped here. Okay, so now the demand curve. So if we're discussing a normal good, and we'll get into a conversation a bit later about the difference in a normal or inferior good, but talking about a normal good, if your income falls, your demand for that normal good will also fall. If income rises, the demand for the inferior good will fall. So that will decrease demand. So I guess just as a prequel to what we'll discuss in more depth later, normal goods are things that you want to produce, and inferior goods are things that you kind of take out of necessity and you don't really want to use them. So that's a way to think of it. So the price of a substitute good falls will decrease the demand curve. Again, we'll talk more about what it means for a substitute good. Complementary good rises. So if something that I consume with my product, so if we're talking about eggs, maybe this isn't the best example in Thailand, but eggs and bacon is a typical breakfast in lots of the world. So if the price of a complementary good rises, such as bacon, then you see a decrease in the demand for eggs. If a good is seen as less favorable, so this is the introduction of the perception of the consumers, right? So if you have new information, if somebody says, bacon is horrible for your health, we just discovered that it makes you grow a seventh arm out of your back to accompany the rest of them, right? Like it causes some genetic mutation. You're going to say, oh, okay, I'm done. I'm not eating bacon. Never again. And then opposite of the seller, so there's an expectation that the price will fall in the future, right? So if you're waiting to buy something in the future because you think it'll be cheaper, then the demand will retract in the short term. And decreasing the number of buyers in the market. Also, excise or sales tax increase. So a tax on consumers. So for example, if you want to decrease smoking, you can add a tax on cigarettes to the consumers. And I think you can probably all guess how this will go, right? So it's pretty much the opposite. Income rises, demand for the normal good will increase. Income falls, demand for the normal good, income falls, demand for the inferior good will increase. The price of a substitute good rises. You're going to, substitute means I have this or that. So if the option to buy something else is more expensive, then you're more likely to consume more in this market. price of complementary good falls, again, something you consume with it. If it is lower in price, you will generally consume more of the two together, the bundle. Goods seen as more favorably. A new study comes out and says, don't listen to that nonsense about the mutation with bacon. Bacon's actually really, really good for you, and it will help you live to be 125 years old. And then everybody says, I'm going to eat more bacon, right? So opposite of what we saw last time. Expectation that the price rises in the future will increase the demand. I'm going to buy it now before it becomes too expensive later. Increase the number of buyers in the market, and a decrease in a sales or excise tax. What I was alluding to earlier. So normal good, consumers buy more of this good as their income rises. Inferior goods purchased out of necessity rather than choice. Right? So it's not something you want to buy, but you don't have enough money to buy the thing you want to buy. So you buy this good, an inferior good. So complements that I said, two goods that are used together. When the price of one increases, the demand for the other decreases. So that's to say that the bundle of the two becomes more expensive, so you consume less. Substitutes, two goods that are used in place of one another. When the price of one increases, the demand for the other increases. So if I can have Pepsi or Coke, Pepsi is more expensive now, so I'll drink more Coke, because I have one or the other. They don't go together. Okay, so we'll have a little quiz. Is this a normal good or an inferior good for transportation? Okay, so raise of hand. Who says normal? Who says inferior? Okay, yes. Excellent students. Yeah, so inferior good. People don't really want to travel. You know, a family of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Family of 7 doesn't generally want to travel on one motorbike, but they do it out of necessity. How about this? Which would you rather travel in? Is this a normal good or an inferior good? Normal, yeah. So given the choice between the two, if you have the money, you prefer to take the taxi instead of being the 8th person to join the motorbike. So this is a photo from Cambodia. There's a vendor selling rats, barbecued rats. Is this something that you would like to spend your money on? No. Is this something you would buy out of necessity? Yeah. So given that, you'd buy it out of necessity. You don't really choose to consume it. If you have money, what is it? Normal or inferior? Okay. Next to it, we have, actually, I'm not sure what that is. Anyway, it looks good, right?
Yes.
I forget. Oh, it's, is it fish amok? Like, yeah. So we have some nice fish amok and steamed rice. Normal good or inferior good? Normal. Excellent. Okay, so now complements or substitutes. Does the fish go with the rice? Yeah. Yes, so they're complements. So given that, if the price of one of the two, so let's say the price of the fish increases, will we consume more or less rice? Less, yeah. Yeah, because the bundle of the two is now more expensive because the fish has increased in price. So if we're consuming the two together, by default, we're consuming less rice as well. Okay. Complements or substitutes. So we have rice or, I don't know what it is in Thai. It's bun and, what? How is it?
In Thai we call khanom jeen.
Khanom jeen. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Right.
So complements or substitutes. Do you eat them together or separately? Separately, meaning they are substitutes. Yes, very good. Okay, how about this? So we have a nice, again with the fish amok, and we have a nice roast, like barbecue chicken. Are these eaten together or are they eaten separately? Yeah, so you would want to have, or both, yeah. Yeah, if you're really doing okay, right? But you probably would like to have at least one of these two to accompany these two, right? So these are substitute goods. You're generally going to eat one or the other with your carbohydrates. Yeah, so these are substitute goods. So what happens then if, you know, this costs, you know, 50 Thai baht, and this costs 50 Thai baht, maybe you're indifferent about the two, but then the next day you go to the market, this is 100. Are you more likely to buy this?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the impact of substitute goods. If the price of a substitute increases, the demand for its substitute will also increase. Okay. How about this? We have an iPad and we have a notebook. Are they complements or substitutes? Substitutes. So yeah, in this case, you can take notes on the notepad, or you can take notes on the iPad. Do you think this is true for all cases of paper? Surprise, surprise, there's another video. Okay.
Emma. Huh? Emma. 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 Emma.
Nouveau le trèfle maxifeuille, vraiment plus large.
So I ask you again, are they complements or substitutes? Yeah, so it's not true for all paper products, right? But in this particular case, yes, a notebook and an iPad are substitutes, but there are some times that isn't true. Okay, so maybe an example that's a bit more relevant to health practitioners. Did you guys have African swine fever in Thailand? What happened to the supply of pigs from African swine fever, right? So if they're getting sick and dying, this is happening, right? So you see a shift. There's going to be less. And this isn't always the case, because sometimes you see panic selling. If before the disease comes in, you see farmers wanting to sell their pigs, so you'd actually see an increase in supply. But yeah, what I'm looking for is that there's a decrease in the supply because the pigs are dying. So that means that we started here at a higher quantity and a lower price, and when there was this decrease in the supply, there was less quantity available in the market, but it was receiving a higher price. Does anybody remember, was that true during African swine fever? When you heard, oh, the pigs are getting sick and dying, did you think, I'm going to go out and buy pig meat, I'm going to go buy pork, right? So this is that idea of consumer expectations or preferences being changed, right? So new information. This is the same as the bacon in the previous example. If it makes you really healthy, you want to consume it. But probably a lot of consumers have concerns over the health and safety quality of the pig meat during an outbreak, right? So what would happen, you think, to the demand of pork during an outbreak? Do you remember? Were you all eating more pork or less pork when there was an outbreak? Less, yeah. So what happens is you see that shift in the consumer preferences. We say, okay, I don't know if it's safe for me to consume infected pork meat. Probably best if I just don't eat it. So you see this decrease in demand, and that gives us then this new equilibrium here, which resulted in a lower quantity available in the market and a lower price. And does that seem more realistic? You're paying less for pork meat during African swine fever outbreak. So you can see, in some cases, there can be a simultaneous impact or a sequential impact on both supply and demand, all starting from the same point. We're gonna do some quick group work, a little bit of algebra to get your brains warmed up. Maybe we won't take too long with this, maybe 5 minutes or so. But if you want to create some small groups, maybe you could turn around and greet each other, have maybe 4 people per group, something like that, 3 or 4 people per group. And we can just quickly go over this example to try to work out how supply and demand are working together. So the first thing that I want you to do is use this information. So we know this formula is what determines demand. This formula is what determines supply. And I want you to see what's the equilibrium price and quantity in the economy for pad thai. So this is the demand and the supply for pad thai. Solving for P and Q, yeah? So we want to do the price and the quantity. So I didn't prepare you very well for this question, I'm realizing. So I'm gonna, yeah.
Okay, I just have a little bit questions. Can you explain how about what the 24 and 8 come from?
Well, we're just giving them. This is just to have an idea of how we're solving this, right? So this is, it might be familiar. Does anybody remember the formula y equals mx plus b? Yeah, so basically it's this. We have an intersection and a slope. And what we're trying to do here is we have the demand and we have the supply. And what did we say was true at the equilibrium point about supply and demand? Do you remember? We said that they were equal to one another. So demand is equal to supply, and then we're solving for P. Or sorry, we're solving, for price and quantity. Can you do number 2? Can you do the graph?
Yeah.
Make the graph.
Graph, okay.
What does Q stand for?
Quantity.
It's quantity of what? Because this is pad thai, P is price, probably.
Yeah, so this is the market
Quantity of what?
pad thai sold.
This for this pad thai.
Yeah.
This big.
Yeah, only for it's not enough, right? But maybe for one person.
Oh, okay. Is the price in Thai baht or
Well, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it can be anything.
any unit? 16.
Yeah, 16 is the price. Have you done the quantity yet? Yeah, quantity is more difficult because, see, for price, it's already there for you. So you do 24 minus 2q equals 8 plus 2q, right? That's how you solved. But now you have to solve first for q. So use some algebra to put q on its own, and then the same thing. So you want to have two new formulas that are q equals.
Q equals to 4.
Q is a function of price now. So we did price as a function of quantity. Now we need to rearrange, using algebra, P equals 24 minus 2Q. I think we need to move on in the interest of time. Does that look about right? I realize that the presentation's already with many of you, so you probably know this already. But yeah, so this is what we should get, right? So like I said, it's easier to solve for quantity because we had already P equals in here, right? We have P equals and P equals for the supply and the demand. So we just set 24 minus 2Q is equal to 8 plus 2Q. So straight away we can already work out the quantity. So that one was more straightforward. To solve for price, we first had to make quantity a function of price. So use some algebra to rearrange, and then we can do this equation here. So in the end, we end up with 16. So on a graph, what does that look like? We see the supply curve starting at the bottom left, going up. As the price increases, sellers are more willing to sell. Demand is sloping downwards. As the price increases, consumers are less willing to consume. And the point they agree on is at a quantity of 4. Here we see a quantity of 4 and a price of 16, so $16. Of course, it's not a very realistic price for pad thai or quantity for pad thai, 16. Maybe it's really good pad thai. So yeah, that's what it looks like. I think we're getting a little tight on time, so instead of really working in groups, we're kind of going to work as one big group through these, I think. Or maybe just take a couple of minutes to think about these questions. So I want you to think about the impact on the market for mangoes under the following scenarios. Indicate for each scenario the likely impact of the equilibrium price and quantity. So think about price and quantity. So in the first one, there's an increase in the price of sticky rice. And what's a good dessert? Mango and sticky rice. So if sticky rice is eaten with mangoes for dessert, it's a complementary good. So if there's an increase in the price of sticky rice, what will happen to the equilibrium price and quantity of mangoes. A new medical study shows that mangoes are really good for your health. Will you eat more mangoes, eat less mangoes? What's going to happen in the market? And then fourth is a technological innovation, increase in the number of mangoes produced per tree. So increase in the amount of mangoes produced per tree. So have a quick think about this. So I'll give you like maybe 2 or 3 minutes just to think these through, and then we'll come back and discuss as one big group, which is a complementary good to mangoes. So when you're thinking about this, if you're thinking about it visually as a graph, where you're going to have supply and demand intersecting, what do you think is going to happen? First of all, which curve will shift as a result of an increase of, so does this impact demand or supply? An increase in the price of sticky rice. Demand. Yeah, so we know first of all that the demand is the one that's going to be impacted. Okay, so then what do we know? So if there's an increase in the price, we said if we're consuming them as a bundle, and one item costs more in this bundle, what happens to our demand? Decrease, yes. So we first identified which curve is going to shift, which direction it's going to shift is the second thing we identified. And now knowing that information, what will happen to the equilibrium price and quantity? If the demand is less, do we produce less, or is the quantity in the market less or more if demand is less? Less. Is price less or more? Yes, less. Okay. So this is what we see, right? First we identified it's going to be a shift in the demand curve. Second, we identified that it's going to be a decrease in the demand curve. And then, knowing that supply is increasing, we can then identify what happens to the equilibrium quantity and price. Okay. So second one, a new medical study shows that mangoes are good for your health. So is this going to be an impact? What do we do first? Which curve is it? So is it demand or supply? Demand, yeah. So it's consumer preferences. We have this new information which changes our preferences. And if we think that mangoes are better for us, do we consume more or less? More. Okay. So now we started here, demand shifts to the right. And the impact on quantity and price is that both will increase starting from our initial quantity, starting our initial price. So price increases, quantity increases. Okay, government places a tax on mangoes. Supply or demand? Supply, yes. So there's a tax on mangoes that inputs into the supply. And what happens with supply? If there's an increase in tax, shifts to the left or shifts to the right? To the left, meaning they consume less, or produce less, sorry. So it's something like this. We started here. There was a shift to the left. So that means we had a lower quantity, but price increased. Okay, in our final example, there's a new technology that helps you produce more mangoes per tree. Is that going to impact the supply or the demand in the market for mangoes? Supply. Is it going to increase or decrease? Increase, right? Okay, so now what happens to the quantity produced in the market? The equilibrium quantity, if we think. Imagine that supply curve shifting to the right. So if it goes to the right, that means quantity increases or decreases? Increases, yes, you're such good students, thank you. Okay, and then what happens to price? Lower price, yeah, decreases. So this is what happens. The innovation causes an increase in the supply, resulting in a higher quantity, but also a lower price. So good for producers, good for consumers. Everybody gets more mangoes and more affordable mangoes.